Really glad you guys are here, and we're really thankful to Barb and Kathie, and then Kevin and Laura for being able to be with us. It was real interesting back in with January or December. We started kind of thinking through and talking about this class and trying to wonder what to do this year. And the thing we kept talking about was, we want to be able to build a community at Broadway, and part of that is in our parenting journey. We continue to hear as parents kind of age out of having kids at home, they've got so much experience, but then those of us with kids still at home, and especially those of us that have moved in, right, that don't always know somebody else, we don't know who else has walked similar journeys, or we don't know who else has kind of gone before us. And so we wanted to take this year in our parenting conversations to have a chance to hear from people that have gone before. And it's funny, almost everybody that I've talked to ask, so like the Bryans and Kathie and Barb, they've all said, we're not perfect. We don't have like perfect examples of this, which is good. We didn't want anybody coming in telling us how we should all do it. There's plenty of that out there. But we invited just brothers and sisters who've been here and who have a journey. And so I'm going to pray, and then they're each going to tell just a little bit about themselves. Matthew over in my left upper right corner, right, he's going to ask them some questions they've had, and they're going to answer and think through those a little bit with us. If you have questions, text them to me. You can text me on my phone, and I'll put it over in the chat so everybody's got it here if you need it. That way, if we've got questions kind of at the end, I'll know that you've got a question, and we can unmute you towards the end, and you can ask that and let our panel be able to kind of exchange and talk through that a little bit. But let's pray, and then we'll let them introduce themselves. So, God, we are thankful for the way you continue to show up. God, I was reminded yesterday of how in the midst of all of our world stopping and in all of our lives taking a different turn, it's still spring, and the trees are still putting out leaves, and the birds are still flying around, and that you are still taking care of your world. And God, we are reminded that as you take care of them, you will take care of us, because you have made us in your image and that you love us. And we're thankful for that. And God, in parenting, we need to hear that. We need to hear sometimes that the current situation we're in will not be the place we are always. And so we're thankful tonight for some friends of ours that are a little further down that journey and can remind us of some of that as well. And so I pray that you be with Barb. I pray that you be with Kathie. I pray that you be with Kevin and Laura. God, may you fill them tonight, and may the spirit that lives in them, God, your spirit, speak powerfully through them, God, as we live together as brothers and sisters. God, thank you for this chance. We pray this in the name of your Son. All right, Barb, how about you go first?
Okay, you just want me to tell a little bit about myself?
Just tell a little bit about yourself.
Okay, went to York College, then transferred to Lubbock Christian, met Steve. We've been married for 42 plus years, have 2 children, in a total now of 5 grandchildren. That's a picture of Aubrey in the pigtails, my daughter Hannah, my son Alan, and then Steve. Steve is a retired U.S. attorney. I'm the district clerk in Lubbock County. Alan is a juvenile probation officer, and Hannah's the chauffeur for 5 children. Is that enough?
That's great. Kathie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I was raised, can you hear me? I was raised by a single mom. My father was in Vietnam and got killed when I was 10. We had 6 kids in my family, and so I lived most of my growing up years just with my mom. So that kind of showed me some things that I thought I didn't know I would need later, because I did get married, but then my ex-husband and I went our separate ways. And so I ended up being a single mom too. I have 2 beautiful children. My daughter, Julie, is 30 and lives in Fort Worth and works for a medical sales company selling equipment like used in the OR. And she's also she does something with Etsy.com, which is an online cosmetic company. I don't know exactly what she does. Something with the books, I'm not sure. But anyway, and then my son lives here in Lubbock. He is a financial advisor. He was working for New York Life, has recently made a change. Mass Mutual, hasn't started yet, but anyway, so that's him. He's 26 right now. He and my daughter are both engaged. Colton will be getting married here in the next week or two. My Julie will be getting married next summer. So as far as my kids, they were raised at Broadway. A lot of their friends they hung out with during their growing up years were from church. They went to camps, they went to Devos, they were involved in youth group. I tried to help them see they need to make good choices for their friends, and for the most part that has been true. So anyway, that's pretty much me in a nutshell right now. So I have to tell you something real quick. I have, I don't know if everybody knows, I have breast cancer, and so he's here. He was always going to me with appointments and always there for me whenever I'd go to appointments here in town. I've also gone to Houston. My daughter met me there and they've both been very supportive throughout this, which makes me feel very proud that they are willing to do that. But recently, my son has decided that he needs to stay away because he does not have the virus, but he's so worried that he might be one of those asymptomatic people, and so he doesn't want to get me sick. So he has made the choice not to see me, which makes me a little mad. But anyway, he's trying to protect me. So even though I don't really like it, he's still, trying to take care of me. So that's pretty much where I'm at right now. So.
Excellent. Thanks, Kathie. Laura and Kevin, tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Like you're first. Ladies first.
We have 4 children. Those are our kids right there. Christy's our oldest, and then Beth. She's the one who lives with us. She's down on the lower right there, and she also has breast cancer and has been undergoing cancer treatment. And then our son, Nolan, lives in Dallas. Our oldest daughter, Christy, in the short hair with the headband there, lives in California. And then Maddie has come back home. She's our baby. She's the one on the far right. And she is home. She's an aspiring actress. And she is home because her theater got shut down in Florida. So we're happy to have her home for right now. Then I have some grandkids. These are the California grandkids, Jackson, Alex, and little Gwen. And we really miss seeing them. And they are in full quarantine at their house. California has shut down everything. They just found out they're not going back to school this year. And then we have Brittany, who lives with us, and she also attends Broadway. She's Beth's daughter.
So remember that we're talking about not perfect parenting, but faithful parenting. Emphasis on the faithful. No reason to polish your answers at all. Just tell us what your experience was. So first of all, we were interested in knowing what was the season that you felt most comfortable or at peace with parenting. And we don't necessarily mean that it was easy. A lot of times it being easy or difficult is dependent on our circumstances. But your sense of peace or confidence, that would be something that came from God. So it may actually be the case that you felt most at peace or most comfortable in your most difficult time. So try to separate those two things in your head if you can. Not easy, but most confident, comfortable, most at peace. What was that time or season? We'll start with you, Miss Barb.
For me, it was when the children were young, preschool. I love babies. I love children. And that was absolutely the easiest. I love that time because they needed me. Junior high became difficult because I didn't know how to respond to all the challenges that kids these days have. It's a lot different than when I was growing up. When I was growing up, the kids that were wild stayed out till 10 o'clock at night, and that was pretty wild. And today, kids are facing a lot more than we ever thought about facing back in the 60s.
All right. Thank you for sharing, Barb. Kathie, what was the time that you felt most at peace parenting? Not necessarily what was most easy, although they might coincide, but when did you feel most at peace?
I loved being a mom. I was, my husband was there to help, and, I just adored it. But I would have to say, probably the most time that I felt like I had the most support was right after Bill left. The kids, Colton was 11, Julie was 15, and they were both, not surprisingly upset, surprised because Bill tried really hard to hide all the feelings he was having before we split up. But anyway, I got amazing support from people from church. That was before we had the single parent ministry, but I had friends who supported me. Both my kids went to Friendship, and a lot of parents at that time here at Broadway went to Friendship. And so Julie had friends that were from church that were her friends at school, and Colton, he didn't really have, most of his friends went to Lubbock ISD. But anyway, I just felt we came up with this little prayer group right after Bill left, and on Wednesday nights we would meet, and it was like probably 8 or 10 ladies, and they were all married except for me, but they were so supportive, and I really felt like God was with me at that time.
So a lot of your peace and confidence came from the community that was around you at the time?
Yes, by myself I was scared to death, and I cried a lot, but yeah, with them there, it helped calm my nerves. It helped me feel like I was doing an okay job, and yeah, it was great. So
thanks for sharing that. Kevin, Laura, what about you guys? What was the time where you felt most at peace in parenting? Not necessarily what was easiest, but when did you feel most confident and most at peace?
Absolutely never. No, I'm also a single mom. Before Kevin came along, my 2 oldest daughters are from a previous marriage. And so I went through the turmoil that is single parenthood. And that is the hardest job on this planet, is being a single mom or single parent. And I think, I had my family support. My mom and dad and sisters were here. My brothers-in-law were very supportive through that. It just, when Kevin came along, there was just something about him and his acceptance of my kids. He didn't just try to buy them gifts and buy their love or whatever. He would actually get down on the floor and play with them and stuff. And so I felt really good about him coming in and joining our family, because I felt like he really cared about the girls. And so yeah, I guess every season has its own challenges as a parent, and so the feelings of peace are different in each season. When they're babies, I loved watching them sleep. When the babies were asleep, it was just so peaceful, and I hadn't screwed up that day because they were still alive, and so that was nice. And I loved watching them sleep as little kids, and it was just that was very peaceful and calming that we'd gotten through another day. And but yeah, junior high years, high school years can be very challenging for parents, and we went through all of that, more so with our oldest child than any of the rest of them, I think. Yeah. But yeah, I think each season is just different and has its own feelings of security and peace, I guess.
Sure. How old were your kids whenever Kevin came into the picture?
10 and 5.
I was a dashing 26 at the time.
All right. Okay. All right, you guys. So next we're gonna, some of you already dipped into it, but now we want to think kind of about your parenting journey and the struggles that you had, whether those were like emotional concerns for your children or like difficulty connecting with your child. Maybe there was even like legal trouble, or they were getting trouble at school, difficulties co-parenting, whatever was going on. You all had different struggles, but in those struggles, what was it that God taught you along the way, or what did you learn about yourself in parenting? And Barbara, we'll go back to you.
I grew up in a family of 3 siblings, 2 parents. It was the perfect Leave It to Beaver household. And then when I had my own family, Steve was, absolutely perfect husband. But my kids weren't quite as good as I remembered the 4 of us growing up together. Alan was, as a young child, very challenging. He was high energy, would get up at 6 in the morning and go into his sister's room and hit her on the head until she cried. That was like our 6 o'clock alarm. He calmed down after that period, after he got in school. Hannah, on the other hand, was, her philosophy in life has been, I'm going to learn it the hard way, I'm going to do it my way, and learn from my mistakes. And there have been a series of those mistakes, and she is now a much wiser person than she has been in the previous years. But while she was making her own mistakes, I learned I was not a patient person at all. I always thought of myself as patient, and I discovered I was not. Steve had to step in and be that patient person. I would get very angry and I would say things. And so that was important that Steve was there.
Barbara, I wonder in that, and I thank you again for being real vulnerable and honest. I wonder, as you kind of walked that journey, when you would kind of see, oh wow, I needed to be more patient. How did you handle that with the kids? And maybe how did you learn to handle that later versus how you maybe handled it in the beginning?
At the immediate time, I had a friend who said she would go stand in the bathroom and scream, or she would go in the backyard and scream. And so that worked a few times. My friend also said she would go to the Sonic Drive-In and order a cherry Coke and sit there from 6 till 9. And so that was always an option. The patience was a long time coming. It wasn't something that happened overnight. And there are times when I still, not so much with my kids or not with Steve, but I work with 35 women at the office. And sometimes they sit next to each other, right next to each other, and they can get in the most ridiculous fights over hot sauce. And then my patience really, really is tested. So the patience factor for me has been, and it still is, a learning process.
Thanks for sharing, Barb. Kathie, what about you? In the midst of all your struggles and your divorce and things like that, what was it that God taught you along the way? What did you learn about yourself?
I prayed a lot. I learned to depend on people who were there to support me instead of trying to do it on myself. I've always been a pretty patient person for the most part. I have a hard time handling the crises that come up. Like Julie was always pretty much the perfect kid. You know, she was sweet, she was cute, she was obedient. She hardly ever questioned me until she really questioned me. When she got in high school, she kind of started, and after her dad left, she kind of started isolating herself from me and not really talking to me a lot. That was hard. I didn't know how to handle that. And that's all I could do. And Colton, on the other hand, was my kid who was always pushing the limits. When he was little, I thought he was autistic because he had to say, for example, and there'd be something on the floor that fell off the shelf, and he'd get so mad, and he'd put it back up there. There were certain clothes he wouldn't wear. There were certain things he just had to do. He had to have this structure and this, it had to be the same. And if it ever was different, he had a hard time. As he got older, he got past that, and he kind of had not a lot, but a few little struggles in school. I think a lot of it's because he's a huge procrastinator, and he would forget things sometimes and have to run back to school. When I got home, because I'm a teacher and I taught out of town at that time, when I get home, I'd have to run back out to school and get something he'd forgotten, so he could do his homework. So that was a kind of a challenge. Didn't know how to do that either, really. I taught to his teachers, and they helped me get through that. They helped him. At the end of the day, he went to one of his, a bit older. He started doing some things that were not good legally, not bad, but he kind of tried some things he shouldn't have, and we had some problems with that. I've never been a rule breaker, so I didn't know how to handle that. As a matter of fact, I think we saw Ryan one time at the juvenile office, and I was like, oh great, now he knows my kid is this troublemaker, but he really wasn't. He was easily influenced by friends that were not, didn't have his best interest at heart. So he's had a few little struggles, but he's matured, he's come around. But all of that, I say all that to say, I church you're supportive, and so that's pretty much how I've gotten through those times.
Kathie, you broke up just at the very end when you went to say what you'd learned.
Oh, okay. I just learned to rely on prayer and the support that I got from my.
Was there a particular moment when you decided, you know what, I can't do this alone, and you intentionally reached out to the community, or did they just see what was going on and did they come to you? How did that work out?
It's usually when Colton was doing some of those things that legally were not okay, and I didn't know what to do. So my first phone call was usually to Curtis Parrish, and he was just, he and Brenda Brenda's like a sister to me. They've just been so supportive. So I reached out and they were there.
That's good to know. Thank you, Kathie. All right, Bryans, what about you guys? In the midst of all the difficulty, what was it that God taught you?
Teamwork.
We shouldn't have been parents.
Yeah. Teamwork.
Okay, teamwork. Say more about that. What do you mean?
A divided front is easily divided by children, as they are master manipulators. And so we would always talk about what was going on behind closed doors, and then we would come up and have a decided decision that would impact the person in trouble's attitude adjustment.
Well, I don't know. I would say we always did that. That was the goal.
Well, she
That's
was bad
tried.
cop. I was good.
Yeah.
You're welcome. But we always came out with the same kind of decision. So for us, I think it was teamwork and patience.
Mm.
The oldest and Laura definitely had the hot push red button all ready to go at any time. And so that was a button that sometimes needed to not be pushed.
I totally understand the saying things that you later regret saying to your kids, because I am not a patient person, and she knew how to push my buttons, and I have said terrible things to her, and we are the best of friends today, but it's just by the grace of God, because she said bad things to me, I said bad things right back. I think one thing I really learned is that I would pass on to other parents is never take anything to heart that a teenager says to you, because it's just words that, and I took those to heart, and it hurt, the things that she was saying to me, and so I wanted to hurt her right back, so I would just lash out back at her, and it just it fanned the flame, and things went from bad to worse. So it if I could tell anybody anything about parenting, don't take anything they say to heart. They're going through a rough time. They're trying to grow up, find themselves, and they may say terrible things. Just
To get a reaction.
pretend they don't mean it and go on.
It's a reaction. They just want a reaction. They want to be able to pull your strings so you can feel just as bad as they're feeling right then, I believe. What are
Laura,
they?
I don't know. I was going to say, I don't know if you could see it, but when you said that, when you said not to take it to heart, I saw a lot of heads nodding out here.
Oh, because they'll say terrible things to you. You know, I mean, every parent at least once hears "I hate you" as the door's being slammed in their face, I think. But yeah, just and just finding your way back to each other is so important too after those things, and you have to be willing to say, "I'm sorry." And that was something that my mother was wonderful. I had a great mom, but that was one thing she never could say to us, that she was wrong. She never could admit that she was wrong. And that's something that I've learned to do. I would tell my kids when I messed up, I was wrong to say those things to you. And I'm sorry. But that's after everything cools off.
Right.
Yeah. All right. I'm trying to watch our time. I think we're doing pretty good on time. So the next question that we had was, how did you care for yourself and or your marriage in the midst of parenting? So whether you did it as a married couple or you did it as a single parent, how did you try to maintain your own health together and separately in the midst of difficulties? So Barb, why don't you start us off again?
Steve and I both developed outside interest and followed those interests, and we spent time together, but Steve was in trial a lot, and so there were times that I was like a single parent. He had one trial in Dallas that lasted 6 weeks, and I had 2 kids, 4 and under, and that was a long 6 weeks. But with outside activities and with a lot of friends from our couples class at church, that made a big difference to me on having that support. And the outside activities, when they were under control and when I managed not to get too involved in them, they were very good for me. But they were also very bad if I let them take over my family life, which I often did. Steve was very interested in car racing, photography, chess. He had a lot of activities that he liked to do. And I think he needed that break to get away from the stress of parenting. So that's how we manage most of the time, is just doing some outside activities.
So there's a second part of this question, and that is, what did you guys do together to try and figure out parenting? You know, did you ever read a book, or did you ever go to counseling, or did you seek out counsel from friends in the church? How did you guys work through the questions you had about what to do next?
Matthew, you obviously don't know Steve very well. Steve is who we call Mr. Research. And he had a book for every answer. He had an article. He had an answer that he had already done the research on, and we would communicate through his research. And I got rather lazy and just let him take the reins and do all that research. No, but he has purchased many books and handed them to me about what I was possibly needing some help with. So.
How was that received? Did you always receive it well if he passed you a book and said, you might need to read this?
I didn't always read them.
All right.
I didn't care if he had suggestions to make to me, and I didn't care if he offered me a book. But if my time didn't allow me to read it, I wasn't going to feel any pressure to put myself in a bind over whatever he was reading. He got a lot of slack at work that the punishment he doled out to the kids was not being spanked or being grounded. It was his lectures that lasted forever. And so I didn't really want to participate in his lectures, so they didn't last very long.
All right. All right. Well, Kathie, what about you? What did you do during some of the difficult times to take care of yourself?
Let me talk a little bit about it when I was still married.
Okay.
Bill always, he had a hard time once we started having kids, not getting all the time he felt like he needed. And so he and I would try to go out with other people, spend some time together. Obviously, it didn't work out very well, but I mean, there were times we had a pretty good marriage up to about 3 or 4 years before we broke up. So, I would say, that's really important, is to spend time with your husband. And we didn't really do the books. Neither one of us really were into that. I tried to get him to go to counseling once. She would not. I think that's important. If you start having trouble, you probably need to do that, because that might have helped us go work at our issues. But anyway, as a single parent, what I would do during the difficult times is I would just, I didn't have a lot of, when Bill and I first split up, all I had were my church people and my family. And my family's they're not all close. My mother was close. She was in Brownfield. I have a sister who lives here, but at that time she was in Brownfield. And so they couldn't really help a whole lot. So I just would try to do a lot of stuff with my friends from church. We'd go out together, and Brenda and I always went on like retreats, and we went to Pine Springs and stuff. So we spent a lot of time with our kids that way. And that really, when you're on those retreats and things, at least for me and for Brenda, they did what they wanted to do with their friends. We'd see them every once in a while and talk to them, but so we got to have that time away from them just to kind of have fun and enjoy, the nature at Pine Springs and the Devos, and, just enjoy all that. So that's pretty much what I did. I did start dating about 4 years after Bill and I split up. And so, I had a gentleman who I was seeing that helped me kind of get away from all that too. So anyway, that's it.
All right. Thanks for sharing. Well, what about the Bryans? What did you guys do to take care of yourselves and to continue to nourish your marriage?
Are you asking us? Sorry.
We all,
We drank a lot. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, we prayed a lot.
we did.
We tried to go on date nights. We've gone on 2 trips together, right?
Yes. Couple of
In
weekends.
30 years of marriage.
30 years of marriage, we've had 7
Without the
months of
kids.
alone time together.
We made it a point to be friends with other people who were also parents of kids, our kids' ages, and so we had people to bounce ideas and frustrations off of that were going through the same things we were.
Sure.
Did read a lot of books and would share ideas and suggestions that the so-called experts said. I think one thing that I'm kind of going back to what we learned, not really taking care of our marriage, but well, I guess it does take care of your marriage. In fact, a lot of things that come up with parenting, you make a lot of mistakes, and you say things that aren't right, or you do things that aren't right, and Satan uses those things on us. And Satan tells us, you're a horrible parent. You're doing a terrible job. You're not raising your kid the way God wants you to raise them, and you're messing up, and you're just a terrible parent. And if you listen to that, you will be a terrible parent, because it will absolutely take all the wind out of your sails, and it exhausts you, and you don't want to even get up and try to be a parent because you feel like you can't do anything right. And you cannot listen to that. He loves to take our guilt over messing up and making mistakes, and he would love to just turn those into terrible parents. But with God's help, and with God's people's help, and family members' help, and each other, you can, if someone's having a weak moment, we can bolster each other up and encourage each other, and not succumb to feeling guilty all the time and feeling like you can't do anything right.
So I
that's
wonder about that. You talk about hearing those voices that you're not a good parent and you're never going to get it right. What did you do to help yourself start to recognize those voices and then to not listen to them?
Probably just reading books about parenting and reading scripture and knowing that if you mess up, there's still redemption and you can be sorry for what you did wrong or the mistakes you made. And I feel like God understands that this is the first time you're going through this. Heaven help our firstborn kids. They're like guinea pigs. And it's just, I thought I was a good babysitter when I was a teenage girl. But when I had them living with me and then they themselves were teenagers, it was a whole nother ball game. And I think just realizing how much God loved me and how much he did for me to forgive me, you have to make a conscious effort not to listen to Satan telling you that you're a failure as a parent.
Yeah, that's good. So we're before we move to our questions, we have a kind of a wrap up question, and this is just for you to reflect on all your years of parenting so far, grandparenting, whatever it is, whatever season you're in, and just to think about what you would do differently. What would you tell your younger self? And Laura's already kind of given us a good lead in there by talking about not listening to those voices that condemn you and your parenting. But Barb, if you could speak to your younger self, what would you tell her to do differently?
I would relax a lot more and appreciate the time. I would spend more time with Steve, and I would develop in my kids' self-esteem and make them feel good about themselves.
That's really interesting that you said that you'd spend more time with Steve. Say more about that. Why would that be more important?
We have a lot of things in common, and we just never spend any time doing that. We want to travel. We have not traveled. They're just things that we had intended to do that aren't getting done. And I wish we could go back and not think about, can we afford this or can we not afford it? And not think about, we really shouldn't do this. We should put the kids first. There were a lot of different standards that we applied that maybe we shouldn't have. But I would teach my kids how to make judgments, right or wrong. I would encourage them to make their own judgments and not have the judgments always come from parents. Because when they turn 18 and haven't had the ability to make those judgment calls, they don't always know how to handle it. And that's what I would change.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Kathie, what about you? What would you do different?
I would probably get a whole new personality change, I think, because I feel like in some ways I was too easy on my kids. I let them do things I probably should have at least not let them go as far as they did. When I was still married, I would have done like Barb said, I would probably spend more time with Bill. He and I went to England once. He went on his own a few times, but we both like to travel. But when the kids were small, I just didn't think that was smart, that it was a good idea for us to travel. But I wish we'd taken our kids with us, because I think that would have helped them see how, what a great country we have, and how we have so many things that we take for granted here. And I'm sure they're seeing that now with this virus, but even in England, it's not near like it is here. And I wish I could have let them see that. They did go on mission trips with youth group, but I'm not sure they saw some of that, but I'm not sure they really got it. So that's probably what I would do.
Thanks for sharing that. Laura, Kevin, what about you guys? Is there anything that you would do differently?
Keep a cooler head, for more of the situations that weren't so necessary. I remember one fight over hair color, and that's when we started to remember, yeah, you know what? It's the smaller things that don't really matter. It's the bigger problems to keep up with. And so more patience with the growing, letting the kids, kind of spread their wings out a little bit more. I thought Laura and I did a real good job, to be honest with you, as a married couple, staying together and kind of moving and grooving. I was lucky because I came from a very good family as well. When they mentioned Leave It to Beaver, that was a lot like my family, but I was the fence tester. Laura was the sweet kid. And so it kind of was a decent blend on knowing both sides of the fence to kind of say, because a lot of times, I would kind of express what the kids might be feeling because I've done it, or something. Not that she hadn't done it, but I think it was just being able to talk about it and not having it affect us, and just knowing that it was just that time. It was being a teen. It was trying to spread their wings and develop their own independence. We tried to let them have their own thoughts. We encouraged them talking back to us in a respectful manner and going from there. So that was one of the things, is we kind of went into it trying to stay as calm as possible. But I think Laura did a real good job, especially as a single mom. That's one thing I've always admired about her, is she kicked some serious booty as a single mom and had great kids and made it easy for me to just kind of step in. I mean, Christy and I are only 15 years apart. So a lot of times she got mad at me because I'd be like the big brother, because I still would whoop her up, and, we'd mess around on the floor and play and all that. I think that also kind of helped us bond, because been there, done that kind of a thing. And I think it was just been a good partnership between me and Laura, and like she said, I never considered any of these kids, none of my kids. They're all my kids. But I kind of came from that. My dad's dad passed away when he was 2. So my dad was also a step kid. So I kind of understood it. And he was raised like a normal kid and not a step kid, but as a normal, that was a Bryan thing. So that's how I wanted to have my family, is all kids are my kids, without full blood or not. That's even how we're treating Brittany. She's my kid.
Yeah. Laura, do you have anything
And
to
I
add?
thought he was,
Oh, sorry.
I thought he was going to say that he learned not to marry somebody with children. But anyway,
Not on camera.
mainly what I would tell my younger self is what I said earlier about not taking things to heart and not listening to Satan tell you that you messed up and so you're a terrible parent. And also that disciplining your children is not bad. So many parents today feel that disciplining their children, and I'm not talking about beating their children. Beating their children is bad, but discipline is not. We're commanded by God to discipline our children. And if we don't discipline them, then they don't learn in the comfort of their homes. And then they're going to be disciplined by somebody at some point. And it might be people they don't want to be disciplined by. So that was one thing that I'm working with the younger people that I have preschoolers with at my preschools, is that so many of them feel that discipline is a bad thing. And because I think they can't separate discipline from spanking or beatings or whatever, or, but it's okay to discipline, and God expects us to discipline our kids. That's how they learn.
Mm-hmm. That's good. So you guys have heard a lot from Barb and Kathie and Laura and Kevin already. You guys have had the opportunity, though, to text some questions in to Randy. Do you have some waiting for us there, Randy?
I don't have any
boy.
questions, but I do wonder if anybody does, they can unmute it and ask.
Ask Laura something good.
We don't have any questions, but we just want to say thank y'all for being open and honest and transparent with us. We appreciate it.
We do appreciate it. I wonder then, what are some of the things that we've heard tonight that are kind of go across the different stories, or what are some of the things that you've heard that have been applicable to your story or your life?
I think for us, like we were told really early on in our marriage, sorry, there's a screaming kid in the background, to make our marriage the priority versus the kids. And I think that really helps us like parent better. Not perfectly, but like we make a point each year to like go on vacation together and find times to go on dates and maintain our relationship as a priority over others. And I think that has helped us a lot and seems to be true as we age. So
Yeah. So I'm probably the newest parent. You know, my boy just turned 8, and one of the things that I heard a lot of you guys talking about was, in essence, to have. I said 8. I meant 8 months. Uh, was to have grace and patience with yourselves, and that's something that I'm already like trying to tell myself. If you know anything about like the Enneagram, one of the things they talk about is like your childhood wound. And the thing about that is everyone has one of those. And what I took away from that is that, you know, all parents are going to make some sort of mistake, and every child's going to grow up saying, I don't want to do this one thing that my mom did or that my dad did or whatever. And so in some odd way, that's actually been comforting to me to think that, everyone has that, everyone goes through that, and we all we survive it, you know, and it does shape and mold who we are. It's not like we just are flippant about it, but it's just an accepting of like my own weaknesses, I suppose, and not being so hard on myself, I guess, like Laura was talking about. So that's just one of the things that I kept hearing. Patience with yourself, to not to take things quite so seriously. And so I was happy to hear that coming from you guys, because that's something I'm already telling myself just 8 months in.
I would kind of echo that. I was thinking the same thing. Is I think all of the speakers were talking about, don't be so hard on yourself. That I kind of want to be that perfect dad, and then when I'm not, then I'm kind of more hard on myself that something went bad, and in all reality, it really wasn't that bad. I mean, so just trying not to be that hard, and then we're fortunate that we can be kind of have that teamwork. I can't imagine y'all that are out there doing this by yourself, because having just that echo voice to run an idea by of, okay, I don't think this is the right thing. Should I have done this? Having that teamwork to handle all the different situations so that we don't overreact or underreact, or maybe somehow we can meet in the middle and maybe get it right.
Or to say, I'm done. You take them
your
before
turn.
I kill somebody.
Yeah. There are those moments.
I want to say something, if I can. From the people who are here, I know some of you really well, and I feel like you guys are doing a great job with your kids just from what I've seen at church. So I just wanted y'all to know that I have a lot of respect for you guys. So
Let me throw this in there too. Melanie was ready to have kids from the moment when she said I do, and I was not so sure about that. But here's the thing actually that kind of made me ready to take the leap was we had this retreat with our Transit 56 kids and parents. And at one occasion, we had this little prayer walk, and there was like a side for the adults and a side for teens, and there were times where they would come together. But I went back, and there were so many great parents there, the parents that you really admire, the parents you want to be like the Adams and the Hoopers and the Settles and so many others there. But one of the stations back there was a fear board, and you were supposed to write on a Post-it note what you were afraid of. And then there were thumbtacks, and you read through the Post-it notes, and those that you shared, you put a thumbtack on. And the thing that struck me was, here were all these parents that I admired, and I hoped to be a parent like them. And every single one of them said that they were scared. They weren't being a Christian example for their children. They were scared that their children were going to fall away. They were scared that their children were going to lose faith. And I thought, man, these are some of the best parents that I've ever been around, and they all are still kind of scared. They're worried they're not doing a good enough job. and yet they've produced some fantastic kids, and they've been fantastic parents. And so when I saw that, I thought, you know what? They have kids who are 16, 17, ready to go off to college, and they still feel this way. So there's no sense in me waiting till I'm not scared anymore to go ahead and do it. I'll just do it. And God's going to be with me, and he'll make crooked paths straight. He'll make up for all my mistakes, you know? So I think the thing that struck me was that we're not alone in parenting. We not only do we have the church, but that God's always involved too. And we have to factor that in, that we'll make mistakes, but our children always have a faithful God who is there even perhaps when we're not.
Well, Kathie and Barb and Kevin and Laura, we really appreciate you guys showing up tonight. And we really appreciate you being willing to be honest. You know, it's not easy to come to a group and just kind of talk about how you've done well and where you've struggled and to present that out there. We really do appreciate that. I remember our first Transit 56 kind of Remind retreat, and several of us guys sitting there with, I think Cody Nelson was there and Dyke was there. And then we sat with Kevin, who's like, hey dudes, I'm a little further down this road. We have to do this together. And I still remember that. And so we get together every now and then, and that's been a great place. And so I am really thankful for y'all showing up here tonight and showing up with your lives and doing that. Thanks everybody else for being here with us tonight too. Kevin, would you pray for us as we kind of finish off tonight? Or Ashley, did you have a question? Were you ready? No.
She was just praising God.
Praise the Lord, right?
Yeah.
All right.
No, I was waiting to buy. I thought it was the wrap up. I didn't know.
Awesome.
I wasn't ready for closing prayer, but I'm ready now. I'll see you guys. Sorry.
Thank you guys for doing this and asking us to be a part of it.
Thank you.
Lord, we just want to thank you for this day and this time together. Lord, we just hope that all the words that were spoken today can be used to the betterment of our families. And Lord, we just thank you for this opportunity to become more of a family of togetherness. And we just thank you for this opportunity. We thank you for your sacrifice on the cross that you made for us and all of our sins. And Lord, we just pray in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thank you guys for being here. Y'all take care.